Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Kyle Reed built his dream home outside HOA borders, he thought he'd found peace. Instead, he sparked a silent war with a power-hungry neighbor who would stop at nothing, even illegal demolition, to make him vanish. Welcome to the nightmare next door. I always imagined that when we finally moved into our dream home, life would get a little quieter, more space, less noise, neighbors at a respectful distance. That was the plan. We'd spent over 2 years searching for the right place, and when we found the 1.8-acre lot in West Cove, Colorado, just above the tree line with a partial mountain view, it felt like a miracle wrapped in pine needles. I'm Kyle Reed, 43 years old, former structural engineer, husband to a saint of a woman named Marla, and father of a sharp 9-year-old who's somehow better at chess than I am. I'm a man who does things by the book. Always have. Maybe it's the engineer in me, or maybe it's the quiet joy I get from order and paper trails. But when we bought this land, I double-checked every zoning boundary, HOA record, and parcel ID like I was defusing a bomb. No HOA, not even close. Officially outside the border of Hollow Hill Estates, on the other side of the road, in fact. That mattered to me. I didn't want someone telling me what color mailbox I could install. I designed the house myself. 2 full stories, wide glass windows, cedar siding, and a deck that wrapped halfway around the back, overlooking the incline and the pines below. The permit process was hell, but I played it straight. Structural reviews, foundation inspections, load-bearing certifications, all signed off by the county. The build took 14 months. We moved in late August, just before school started. Everything felt like it was finally aligning. Then came the first leaflet. It showed up folded under the windshield wiper of my truck. A grainy photo of my house, zoomed in from an odd angle like it was taken from the woods. At the top, in red bold print, it read, "Say no to monster homes." I blinked at it, confused, until I saw the subheading. This 2-story eyesore violates the spirit of our community. There was no name, no contact info, just vague threats about community character and visual damage. At first, I thought it was a joke. I figured some neighbor just didn't like modern design. Then I started finding more leaflets, one on the community bulletin board at the grocery store, another tucked under the doormat. Some were professionally printed. One had a mocked-up image of our house crumbling with the caption, "Demolish the violation." And still, I ignored it. I figured this was someone with too much time and too little architectural taste. Then I met her. It was early Saturday morning, just before sunrise, and I was pulling weeds around the edge of the driveway when I saw her. Early 60s, perfectly styled blonde bob, designer tracksuit, clipboard in hand. She stood across the road at the edge of Hollow Hill Estates, watching my house like it had insulted her ancestors. She made eye contact, didn't smile, then turned and walked away. Marla told me her name was Karen Truman, president of the HOA. The Queen of Hollow Hill. One neighbor called her with a smirk. She controlled everything on that side of the road. Grass length, roof tile colors, even the allowed shades of seasonal wreaths. She made the Stepford Wives look punk rock. I didn't think much of it until the letter came. It looked official. A logo that resembled the county seal, but not quite. A header that read, "Zoning Violation Notice, Urgent." The body accused me of building a home that exceeded the vertical allowances for the area and cited a Hollow Hill community regulation as justification. I nearly laughed. I wasn't in Hollow Hill. My property wasn't part of their jurisdiction. I drove down to the county zoning office that day and handed the letter to a clerk named Denise, who squinted at it like it was written in crayon. "This isn't from us," she said. "You're not in any HOA. You're clean." She even pulled up the parcel map and printed it for me. I was clearly outside the HOA's bounds. And the house. Built legally. Every inch. I should have felt relief. Instead, it felt like the beginning. 2 days later, someone left a rolled-up notice in our mailbox. Again looking official, again unsigned. This one included a fake fine for non-compliance. Failure to address structural violations may result in daily penalties of up to $750. I laughed out loud. It was so clearly fraudulent that I pinned it to the fridge like a bad kid's drawing. Marla didn't laugh. That same week, I noticed the cameras. One across the road, mounted on a telephone pole facing our house. Another one hidden in a birdhouse on a neighbor's property, pointed directly at our upstairs bedroom windows. My son came home from school saying one of the neighborhood moms told her kid we were bringing down property values. People were talking, judging. Then came the note. No envelope, just a single sheet of paper slid under our front door. Thick black marker, all caps. You shouldn't have built here. Take it down or we will. I sat down on the stairs and read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just pettiness anymore, it was personal. It was a threat. And I was just getting started figuring out who the hell these people thought they were. I tried to ignore it. I told myself that a few leaflets, some weird mail, and a nosy neighbor weren't worth the emotional real estate, but ignoring it didn't work. Not with people like Karen. People like her feed on silence, on indifference. And I was about to learn that ignoring her wasn't just naive, it was dangerous. About a week after the "take it down or we will" note, I received a new envelope in the mail. This one was thicker, heavier. The return address read, Hollow Hill Estates Architectural Review Board. The seal looked vaguely municipal, like someone had tried to replicate an official county header, but lost the original halfway through a wine bender. Inside was a 5-page notice citing incompatibility with community standards, including an actual demand for voluntary compliance, which, in this context, meant I should start removing the second floor of my house, or face formal proceedings. Now let me remind you again, I am not in Hollow Hill Estates. My property is on the other side of the damn road. The parcel map looks like someone drew a line with a ruler, and I'm clearly on the safe side of that line. Their rules don't apply to me. But that didn't stop them from trying. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Marla and went through the documents line by line. Every page was riddled with meaningless citations to regulations that didn't apply to me. Most referenced internal HOA guidelines. A few weren't even real laws. One citation just said State Design Code Alpha, which I'm pretty sure is something they made up while watching HGTV. Still, Marla was worried. This is harassment, she said. They're not going to stop. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, flyers started appearing on community mailboxes, full color, printed on glossy cardstock. They featured a distorted photo of my house taken from the curb across the street, edited to look darker, almost ominous, like some kind of villain's lair. The headline read, Stop the Skyscraper, Preserve Our Views. Below that, attend the emergency HOA meeting to demand action. They made it sound like I'd built an oil rig in the middle of a park. I called my lawyer, Pete Weller, a guy I'd worked with back when I was still consulting in construction. He met me that afternoon and flipped through the packet of HOA nonsense while sipping burnt coffee out of a paper cup. You're not in their jurisdiction, he said plainly. This is noise, legally meaningless, but it could become something if they get bold or stupid. Spoiler alert, they got both. Over the next several days, I started seeing unfamiliar cars slowly driving past our house, people taking pictures. Some neighbors stopped waving, others avoided eye contact altogether. One evening, I came home to find a large cardboard sign staked into the grass at the end of my driveway. It said, HOA violator, shame, in bright red paint, like a fucking scarlet letter for homeowners. I took it down and threw it in the garage, but it didn't matter. The damage was creeping in, like mold. Then came the canvassers. 3 women in yoga pants and pastel vests knocked on my door, all of them from Hollow Hill. One held a clipboard and introduced herself as the outreach chair. They weren't there to welcome me to the neighborhood. They were there to let me know, in the most polite, condescending tone imaginable, that several families have expressed deep discomfort with the design of my home. We're just here to gather support, she said sweetly, to ensure architectural integrity and mountain visibility are preserved. I closed the door on them mid-sentence. The next day, a local real estate agent cold-called me. She claimed to have heard through the grapevine that I might be looking to sell. She had a motivated buyer ready to offer cash if I was willing to price appropriately given the circumstances. I told her to lose my number. It wasn't even subtle anymore. Karen and her little HOA army were turning up the heat. And it wasn't just passive pressure. That week, our son Eli came home from school looking like someone had kicked his puppy. Apparently, one of his friend's parents told them not to play at our house anymore. Something about it being dangerous, he said. They said our house wasn't supposed to be there. Marla cried that night. I didn't. I just got mad. Mad in that cold, slow-boiling way that makes you dangerous. I started documenting everything. Photos, videos, dates and times, every flyer, every letter, every fake notice. I opened a file on my desktop called HOA BS and started compiling evidence like I was prepping for a war crimes tribunal. Then, as if things weren't surreal enough, I caught someone on our property late one night, just past midnight. A figure in a hoodie ducked into our front garden, bent down, and left something on the porch before sprinting away. I reviewed the security camera footage. The gift. Another fake violation notice, this one with an HOA seal made out of clip art and what looked like Comic Sans font. At this point, I realized they didn't care about rules. They cared about power, and I had something they couldn't control: height, visibility, and a legal address outside their reach, which meant they were going to get desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. The first Saturday in October started like any other, a chill in the air, the kind that hinted snow wasn't too far off. I had to drive to Denver that morning to meet a former client about a potential consulting gig, something to bring in extra cash now that the house was finished and the dust had settled. Or so I thought. We left early. Marla took Eli to visit her sister in Aurora for the weekend, and I headed into the city, not expecting the world to collapse while I was gone. The first call came just after lunch. It was my neighbor Jordan, retired Navy, calm as a monk and twice as observant. "Kyle," he said, "you need to get back here. Now." He wasn't the type to call unless there was blood or fire. My heart sank. "What happened?" "They're tearing your house apart." I must have gone silent because he repeated it. "They showed up with construction crews, heavy equipment. A damn excavator, Kyle. I think it's HOA. Karen's here. She's saying it's a demolition." I didn't even hang up. I just threw the phone in the passenger seat and hit the gas like the devil was chasing me. I live almost an hour from Denver. I did it in 43 minutes. I blew past 2 speed traps and didn't care. By the time I turned onto our street, my stomach was a tight knot of disbelief and rage. And then I saw it. The house. My house. My goddamn house. The second floor was half exposed. The roof, the goddamn cedar roof I'd spent 3 weekends installing, had been sliced clean through on the west side. The deck railing had been ripped out. One of the bedroom windows was shattered, shards of glass glittering in the grass like confetti at a funeral. There were men in reflective vests hauling lumber and insulation into a dumpster parked at the edge of my lawn. A portable generator buzzed beside a ladder leaning against the frame. The scene looked like a renovation. It was anything but. And there she was. Karen Truman, standing on my driveway with a folded paper in one hand, gesturing like a conductor at an orchestra of destruction. I slammed the truck into park and bolted out, heart in my throat. What the hell is going on? Karen turned, smiled like I'd just walked into a bake sale. "Oh, Mr. Reed, you're back." She held up the paper. "We're conducting a partial deconstruction under emergency community order. Your structure violates the vertical conformity policy." "You don't have jurisdiction," I shouted, barely able to breathe. "This property isn't part of your HOA." She blinked, like she didn't even register the words. "Sir, we're well within our authority under Resolution 4.2. Your home is causing significant visual disruption to the established skyline." I couldn't even process that level of insanity. "You're tearing apart a legally permitted, privately owned house, which was never approved by the Hollow Hill Architectural Committee." "Because I'm not in Hollow Hill." Jordan appeared at my side, holding his phone. "Police are on the way. I already called." "Thank God," I muttered. I marched past Karen, who had the audacity to try blocking my path, and stormed inside, or rather, what was left of the upstairs. They'd torn through the outer wall of Eli's bedroom. His bookshelf had been knocked over, books and toys scattered across the floor like shrapnel. I walked into our master bedroom. Half the ceiling was gone. There was a literal hole open to the sky. I don't remember how long I stood there, but at some point, the flashing red and blues lit up the street. 2 county officers arrived. One I recognized, Deputy Hartman, a guy I'd seen at the local diner a few times. I met them on the lawn, barely holding it together. Karen, of course, tried to take control immediately. "Officers, thank you for coming," she said, smiling like this was her goddamn cocktail hour. "I'd like to file a complaint about obstruction. This homeowner is preventing us from enforcing community code." Hartman raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, you authorized this?" "Yes," she said proudly, holding up her folded sheet. "Here's the order." He took it, unfolded it, and frowned. "This isn't from the county." No, it's from the HOA. It's valid under subsection. You're telling me, Hartman interrupted, that you entered this property, hired a contractor, and began deconstruction based on an internal HOA document? Karen's face stiffened. It's binding. Not here it isn't, Hartman said. He turned to me. Mr. Reed, I handed him the packet I'd brought back from the zoning office weeks ago. Permit approvals, boundary maps, the full parcel registration proving I wasn't under Hollow Hill jurisdiction. Hartman flipped through the pages, then looked back at Karen like she'd just confessed to arson. I'm ordering all activity stopped immediately, he said. Everyone off the property. Karen's mouth flapped open like a fish in a frying pan. But this man is in violation. No, Hartman cut her off. You're in violation. This is criminal trespass, destruction of private property, and possibly fraud depending on how you sold this to the contractors. The crew, realizing which way the wind was blowing, started backing off and loading their tools. One guy gave me a sympathetic nod on his way out. He probably thought I was the crazy one when this started. Karen was still sputtering as Hartman took her aside. I stood there in the wreckage of my home, staring at the splintered wood, the gaping holes, the shredded insulation dancing in the wind. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so goddamn insane, and because this was far from over. The morning after the break-in demolition, or as I now call it, the Hollow Hill Chainsaw Massacre, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the wreckage through the open second-story frame. Cold air drifted through what used to be Eli's bedroom wall. My coffee had gone cold, but I hadn't moved in over an hour. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was activated. I spent that Sunday on the phone, not just with insurance, but with every zoning and property authority in the county. I needed confirmation, hard proof, receipts. I wanted every dot and comma that showed I had nothing to do with that HOA, and that what they did wasn't just an overreach, it was criminal. On Monday, I met with Pete, my lawyer, in his office. I brought him the fake demolition order that Karen had waved around like it was the Declaration of Independence. He studied it for 2 minutes, then looked up at me like I'd handed him a dead fish. This is laughable, he said. There's no seal, no official signature. Hell, they used Times New Roman in 3 different font sizes. He flipped to the second page and squinted. Wait. This isn't even a real statute. It cites HOA Resolution 4.2a, but that document's internal. It has no legal authority outside their boundaries, and you're clearly not inside those boundaries. I nodded. You're damn right. So we dug deeper. Pete brought in a private investigator and a digital forensics expert, an IT guy named Damon who looked like he lived off energy drinks and revenge. Damon took one look at the HOA's emails that had been circulating. Some neighbors had forwarded me copies of what they thought were community updates that included things like dangerous illegal structure in violation of community elevation code, executive action pending. Turns out they were sent through a masked domain using a spoofed version of the county's planning office email. The kicker? The IP address traced back to the Hollow Hill Clubhouse Wi-Fi router. He cross-checked logins. It was Karen's HOA assistant, some dude named Max, who apparently majored in word art and conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, Pete filed an official complaint with the county, along with a cease and desist against Hollow Hill. The investigators started contacting the contractor who did the damage. At first, the guy was defensive, claimed he had paperwork, and believed it was authorized. But when we pushed, he agreed to hand over the documents Karen had given him. They were damning. The work order he showed us had the Hollow Hill logo crudely photoshopped onto what was supposed to look like a municipal demolition order. There was no mention of my name, my property, or any official county involvement. And the signature, Karen Truman. It was like she thought no one would ever bother to check. I took the whole folder, scanned every page, and sent it to Pete, Damon, and my insurance rep. And I kept copies printed out in a fireproof box, because by now I wasn't just expecting escalation, I was counting on it. Back at home, I documented every inch of damage. Drone shots, time-stamped photos, interior walkthroughs. I created a private site for evidence storage and logged everything. Marla tried to hold it together, but when Eli saw his shredded bookshelf and asked if his room had been bombed, she had to step outside and scream into a throw pillow. I didn't blame her. That week, we started to hear whispers from inside Hollow Hill. A neighbor named Diane, someone I hadn't spoken to much before, left a note under our doormat. No return address, no signature, just a handwritten message. Karen forged documents. You're not the first. Ask about the Simmons family and check the HOA meetings from last June. Things don't add up. So I did. We pulled meeting transcripts from public records. Hollow Hill had voted on a temporary authority clause to allow emergency structural decisions in special circumstances. But it had never been ratified by the board. It was Karen's idea, pushed through by fake votes. According to attendance logs, 2 of the approving members had been out of state at the time. 1 was hospitalized. This wasn't just aggressive enforcement. This was fraud. I started to compile witness statements. Jordan agreed to testify. The contractor, after a few firm conversations with his lawyer, was willing to admit he'd been misled. Damon had full digital trails, spoofed emails, fake ordinances, and the entire metadata of the forged documents. And then came the cherry on top. One of Damon's scans turned up a document in a shared Google Drive used by the HOA's board. Hidden in a folder labeled Budget Archive was a draft version of the demolition order, with tracked changes, including a comment that read, "Make it look official, remove Kyle's name." The owner of the file, Karen. She didn't just order the job, she orchestrated it, edited the lie, and told her assistant how to sell it. We had her, or so we thought. Because while we were building our legal arsenal, Karen was preparing something else entirely. Something bigger, something public. It started with a Facebook post. A grainy, overexposed photo of my house, cropped at an angle that made it look taller, darker, and vaguely menacing, appeared on a page I'd never heard of. Stop the eyesore. Save Hollow Hill. The caption read, "Would you want to live next to this code-violating monstrosity? Built without proper approval, towering over our peaceful community, lowering property values, and threatening neighborhood cohesion." The post had over 200 shares by the time I found it, and the comments section, Jesus. Some of them were obvious trolls, sure, but many were real people, neighbors, parents, teachers. I saw names I recognized from school pickup lines and HOA flyers. They were accusing me of endangering children, hiding building violations, constructing a safety hazard, and even, my personal favorite, destroying mountain serenity. One woman wrote, "If he doesn't respect the rules of the neighborhood, what else is he hiding?" Another, "I heard his place was built over an old landfill. That's why it smells weird when the wind shifts." It would have been hilarious if it wasn't horrifying. Karen had launched a full-blown PR war. Within 2 days, the Stop the Eyesore group had more than 700 members. They were pumping out edited drone footage of my house, paired with dramatic music and text overlays like, "Not in my neighborhood." Someone made a fake blueprint that labeled my upstairs office as an unpermitted third-story deck. Another post claimed I'd installed non-compliant electrical systems that could spark a fire at any time. It was propaganda-level bullshit, but it was effective. Local community blogs began referencing the group. A few small-time real estate YouTubers picked it up. One did a 10-minute segment titled, "How One Man's Illegal Build Tanked a Zip Code." They didn't name me directly, but the aerial shots left no ambiguity. By the end of the week, I couldn't go to the grocery store without someone side-eyeing me. One woman stood behind me in the checkout line and muttered, "People like you ruin neighborhoods." I turned and asked what the hell that meant. She didn't answer, just walked off like she'd just warned a serial killer. Marla was shaking when she showed me a message someone had sent her on Instagram. A photo of our house with a caption, "TikTok, not welcome." Another read, "Run while you still can. You'll never belong here." Eli came home crying. One of the kids at school told him our house was going to be torn down and we'd be homeless. I tried reporting the Facebook group. No dice. It wasn't technically breaking their terms of service, according to the appeals response. Community discussion about architecture and zoning disputes is allowed. Pete, my lawyer, was furious. "This isn't just harassment, it's coordinated defamation. They're poisoning your reputation, building public pressure. It's a tactic." He was right. They couldn't win legally, so they were trying to win in the court of public opinion. Pete recommended bringing in a PR consultant. I wasn't thrilled about it, but at this point, I needed someone who knew how to fight in the mud. Enter Dana Voss. She was in her early 40s, had worked in crisis management for city council campaigns and rogue tech startups, and she had zero tolerance for bullshit. She watched the HOA videos, scrolled the comment threads, and turned to me with the calm of a trauma surgeon. "They're good," she said, "but they're lazy. sloppy edits, no sourcing. We can bury them. She had me record a video. Straightforward, no drama, just me sitting in front of the damaged house with the exposed upstairs framing behind me. I walked viewers through the permits, the zoning boundaries, the fake demolition order. I explained plainly and calmly that I wasn't in Hollow Hill, never had been, and that I was now the target of an illegal campaign to bully me off my land. Then I ended the video with this line: I followed every law. They broke them all. And now they want you to believe I'm the problem. Dana posted it to Nextdoor, Reddit, and a few local forums. Then she sent it to every media outlet within 50 miles. It blew up. Within 24 hours, the video had over 70,000 views. Within 72 hours, I was on a local radio station telling the story live. Then Channel 4 News reached out. Their evening segment ran under the headline, HOAs overreach, man's home targeted for legal construction outside association jurisdiction. Karen lost her mind. She gave a press interview the next day, standing in front of the Hollow Hill sign, practically vibrating with rage. She called my video misinformation, claimed I had doctored permits, and said I was stoking online mobs to threaten concerned citizens. But the public sentiment had already started to shift. Other homeowners, ones inside Hollow Hill, started contacting Pete, anonymously at first, then more openly. Stories started trickling in. Fake citations, aesthetic fines with no basis, threats to take down fences and repaint walls. Then a woman named Janelle stepped forward and offered to go on record. She had been fined over $3,000 for non-regulation blinds, which she later discovered weren't even mentioned in the bylaws. Karen had been playing dictator for years. And now, finally, people were watching. After weeks of feeling like I was trapped inside a bad episode of Black Mirror HOA Edition, something shifted. It started small. A few neighbors, people I didn't know well, mostly from the Hollow Hill side, sent emails through the contact form Dana had embedded in the website she built for my case. Some were just apologies. Others offered screenshots, minutes from meetings, or copies of letters they'd received over the years that had the same signature lines, the same fake legal formatting. But then came the real breakthrough. A former board member named Brian reached out anonymously. He used burner Gmail and insisted we communicate through a secure message platform. Dana ran a quick background check. He was legit. Served on the Hollow Hill Architectural Review Committee for nearly 2 years before abruptly resigning. His message was blunt. Karen's been abusing her power for years. She uses fear, fines, and fake votes. I have proof. I want out. We met him in a quiet coffee shop outside town. Nervous guy, mid-50s, accountant energy, kept checking the windows like someone might jump out and confiscate his conscience. He handed us a USB drive with over 300 documents, internal emails, HOA meeting recordings, PDF scans of fake fines, and doctored violations. One folder was titled Flag Colors Enforcement Targets. Another was labeled Potential Pushback Suppression List. And there, right in the middle, was a subfolder called Kyle R. Special Case. Inside, a timeline. A full tracking of my construction from permit filing to completion. Karen had been watching me long before I even poured the foundation. There were drone photos, neighborhood complaints, some clearly written by the same person under different names, internal strategy documents about narrative management, and copies of the spoofed email headers Damon had already traced. She didn't just hate my house, she'd orchestrated a months-long siege to destroy it. And me. Pete reviewed the files, then looked at me and said, "It's time." We filed suit the next morning. The claim included everything: trespassing, destruction of private property, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, mail fraud, digital impersonation of a government agency, and perhaps most damningly, criminal conspiracy. Karen was served at the monthly HOA meeting. According to Janelle, who recorded it on her phone from a lawn chair with a margarita in hand, Karen tried to pretend the court papers were pet adoption pamphlets. That was short-lived. The second she read the words civil suit and damages exceeding $250,000, her face froze like someone hit her with a stun gun. The PR war changed too. Dana flipped the pressure. She released a public statement that included redacted screenshots of the internal Karen files. News outlets ran headlines like, HOA tyrant accused of forging legal orders to demolish home outside her jurisdiction. From landscaping to litigation, how one woman tried to rule a county block by block. I got calls from podcast hosts, legal analysts, even a local congressman's office who was looking into homeowner rights legislation. I wasn't just a target anymore, I was a symbol. And that symbol was pissed. Karen, of course, didn't go down quietly. Her lawyer tried to argue that the HOA was within its rights to enforce visual uniformity even outside its direct boundaries if the home impacted neighborhood cohesion. Pete laughed for a solid minute in the courtroom hallway before filing a motion to strike every word of that nonsense. Meanwhile, more residents came forward. An older couple, the Simons, told us Karen had forced them to remove a backyard greenhouse under the threat of environmental code violations. Another woman shared photos of Karen entering her property uninvited to measure the length of her shutters. The house of cards was folding fast. County authorities launched their own investigation. The forged documents alone, especially those impersonating county logos and zoning departments, carried weight. Damon printed metadata reports showing the false documents were created on a Hollow Hill office laptop. The timestamps matched Karen's personal login. Game, set, match. Karen tried a press conference. Big mistake. Wearing a scarf like she was testifying before Congress, she declared, "I have always acted in the interest of this community. I regret nothing." Someone from the back shouted, "We regret you." And it spiraled from there. The live stream went viral for all the wrong reasons. My favorite comment, "Is this HOA or a cult?" By the end of the week, Karen's vice president resigned. 2 more board members issued statements distancing themselves from all unilateral decisions made under Truman's tenure. The best part? One of them said they'd been banned from seeing the financial books for over a year. It was unraveling faster than she could lie. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Not while my son still slept in a guest room because his was missing a wall. Not while my wife triple-checked the locks every night. The war wasn't over, but the tide had finally turned. Courtrooms smell like old paper, bad coffee, and anxiety. Ours was no different, except this one wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a public autopsy of everything Karen Truman had built, controlled, and abused. The trial lasted 4 days. On the first day, Pete opened with what he called the map and the madness. He rolled out the county parcel map across the courtroom screen, highlighted the boundary lines of Hollow Hill Estates, then zoomed in on my property, clearly outside their jurisdiction. He explained the permits, the inspections, the approvals, all perfectly legal. Then he showed the wreckage, drone footage, interior shots of the ripped-up second floor, Eli's broken bookshelf, a close-up of the laminated demolition order Karen had signed, complete with her forged seal and a fake legal citation that referenced a non-existent regulation. Municipal height restriction might as well have quoted the Bible. Karen's lawyer objected constantly, overruled almost every time. By day 2, we brought in the contractor who'd carried out the partial demolition. He took the stand, hands clasped nervously, and explained how Karen had approached him with what appeared to be a legitimate municipal directive. She even mentioned she had a connection with the county zoning board, which, as it turns out, was about as real as her ethics. He said he trusted her because she spoke with authority, wore a badge with the HOA logo, and handed him documents that looked like they came from City Hall. When he realized the truth, he tried to back out, but by then, the roof was already halfway off. The courtroom was dead silent. Karen sat there like a statue, lips tight, eyes forward, occasionally scribbling notes that looked more like rage doodles than strategy. On day 3, we introduced the digital evidence. Damon, our tech wizard, explained to the court, slowly and clearly, how the spoofed emails came from the Hollow Hill IP range, how the demolition order was edited using a personal Google account tied to Karen's HOA email, and how the metadata showed tracked comments like, "Remove Kyle's parcel number, just list coordinates." That wasn't just circumstantial, that was intent. The judge leaned forward during that part. He scribbled something and nodded, not like he was surprised, but like he'd expected it all along. Then came the HOA whistleblowers. Janelle testified about the fake blind citations. Brian, the ex-board member, detailed how Karen bypassed votes and faked meeting attendance. He even provided voice recordings from meetings where Karen flat out said, "I don't care what the county says. This is my neighborhood." It was a damn horror movie. Karen's defense, that she believed she was acting in the best interests of the community, and that the visual integrity of Hollow Hill was under assault. Her lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, a passionate protector who overstepped but meant well. Pete shut that down with one simple line: "Passion doesn't excuse felony-level fraud." On day 4, I took the stand. I didn't make a speech. I didn't cry. I told the court what it was like to come home to half a house, what it was like explaining to my son why his bedroom had no wall, what it was like watching my wife flinch at every knock on the door, and what it was like being vilified online by people who had never even met me. Then I ended with this. This wasn't about a house. It was about control, and what happens when someone decides the rules don't apply to them because they've gotten away with it for too long. When I stepped down, Pete rested our case. The verdict came back 2 days later. The jury found in our favor on every count: trespassing, defamation, property destruction, document forgery, emotional distress, and civil conspiracy. Total damages awarded $340,000. The judge added a personal note in his closing remarks. HOAs are not above the law, and neither are those who weaponize them for personal agendas. As for Karen, the county DA filed criminal charges the next morning: forgery of government documents, conspiracy to defraud, destruction of private property, the whole stack. Her bail hearing was broadcast on the local news. She wore the same power scarf from her last press conference, but this time her face looked like wet cement, a collapsed monument. I didn't smile, but I did breathe, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel like inhaling poison. The repairs took 4 months. We hired a different contractor, someone Jordan personally vouched for. He showed up with a team that worked like surgeons, careful, steady, no nonsense. They didn't ask questions about what had happened, just nodded when I showed them the damage and said, "We'll make it right." And they did. Eli got a new room, same layout, but with reinforced insulation, stronger window frames, and a custom-built bookshelf made from reclaimed cedar. Marla repainted the living room in a warmer tone. "Fresh start," she said. She smiled more now. Not always, but enough to notice. I added a few things too. We built a small rooftop loft over the master bedroom, a kind of mini observatory with a flagpole. Not because I'm patriotic, but because I wanted a symbol, something tall, something that could be seen from across the street in Hollow Hill, something that said, "I'm still here." And at the base of the driveway, I mounted a solid steel sign, matte black, laser-etched letters. "This is where your HOA ends, and my home begins." I didn't expect applause, but I got nods from passing cars. One guy in a Hollow Hill baseball cap gave me a thumbs up and didn't even try to hide it. Karen, she took a plea deal. 3 years probation, a suspended sentence, community service, and mandatory restitution payments. The mugshot made the rounds online for a while. Eyeliner smeared, expression half defiant, half broken. The HOA board collapsed shortly after. Turns out, when your president is indicted and your books are subpoenaed, neighbors lose interest in quarterly meetings about the approved shade range of seasonal pumpkins. A temporary manager was appointed by the county. Last I heard, they were moving toward dissolving the HOA entirely. The phrase voluntary community council started floating around in news reports, which is HOA speak for "please don't sue us anymore." We never did move. We talked about it. There was a moment, right after the trial, when Marla asked, "What if we just sold it and started fresh?" But I couldn't do it. Not because I was too proud, not because I wanted revenge, but because this place, the land, the design, the structure, was ours. It was made with patience, paperwork, and sweat. We'd earned it. We fought for it. And I refused to let a tyrant with a clipboard steal that from us. One afternoon in early spring, I stood out on the new upstairs deck. Birds were coming back, the pines swaying in the breeze. I looked out over the ridgeline, and there it was, the view. The one Karen had tried to destroy my home to preserve. She could have just walked across the street and asked to borrow it. Instead, she turned it into a war. But here's the thing about people like her. They build fences out of fear, walls out of ego. And when someone pushes back, really pushes, those walls crack. And eventually, they fall.